Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Fluffenbusters, where we put on a movie we love and create our own feature length commentary. Today, we kick off the first of 6 shows, covering Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, the Special Edition. Each show will cover half a film, just like the DVDs did. However, these recordings will differ from what we've put up so far on this channel. There's several reasons for that, and best to make you aware. First off, we recorded these shows well over a year ago. In fact, we thought we'd lost the audio as nothing was ever done with the recordings. Secondly, they were also recorded before Dee and I really knew what we wanted to do with the channel. We knew we enjoyed the process of chatting while these films played, and thanks to that, we not only made the effort not to comment on the films as they appeared, but we lent into any digressions. So you'll hear us spending 10 minutes talking about the Rings of Power, or the changing face of fandoms, or even other franchises like Star Trek. Now, those digressions, those points and views that we air here, do feed back to Fellowship, and they all have a relevance. But I'll admit, it's a very different approach for a fan commentary. Also, I was just getting into podcasting myself after an extended break. And so I'm a little bit more hesitant with my points here and my presentation than I am nowadays. Nowadays, you can't shut me up. All of this is to say that this is a gentler chat, a more thoughtful chat, something that you can hopefully enjoy over the Christmas period. If you like the idea of us waffling in the background whilst you work on a creative project, or you just like to escape the chaos of your family at Christmas, this is definitely for you. I really hope you enjoy the recording, and I'll speak to you soon. Now, on to our older selves.
Welcome to this episode of Fluffenbusters. I'm Mr. D. I'm joined by Mr. White,
Hello.
and it's the first of a two-parter where we're going to be tackling The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, brackets extended edition.
Yes.
Arguably one of my top 5 favorite films of all time,
Yeah.
easily.
It's pretty much peak DVD, would you say?
Oh yeah, this is a film that, as much as I have adored seeing it in the cinema, and I have seen it more than a few times now over the years with re-release and stuff. The home releases. I mean, I own 3 separate DVD versions because I bought them all as they came out individually in their 2 disc
Yep.
editions,
Yep.
which in their own right are all spectacular editions because the bonus disc on each one of those is loaded to the gunnels.
Mm-hmm.
I then bought the extended editions, which beyond the extended cuts and the commentaries, which are worth the price of entry alone, you have the 2 bonus discs, which have even more material. And there's no duplication, by the way, on these. It's all fresh content.
Yep.
And then about 3, 4 years after Return of the King came out, they did another release, which was it was weird because you got the extended and the theatrical cuts in the same edition,
Yeah.
and you also got an entirely new bonus disc with
Yeah,
an
I think
with
I think I remember that.
yeah, which was entirely new material that had been
Hmm.
shot behind the scenes whilst the filming was going on, but it hadn't been released up to that point.
Hmm.
Um, And also, you didn't. I don't think you had to. I think you could watch the extended cut without flipping. Although I may be wrong on that. I know that with the digital releases, you don't have to break your viewing.
Okay.
Although I think possibly with the Blu-rays, you may have to. Uh, and Fellowship, I also have a Blu-ray edition of because I bought the. They did a steel tin edition of the extended cut later down the
Mm-hmm.
line. So 4 discs again, but in a lovely tin. I was always kind of gutted they never went back and did the rest of the Rings trilogy that way because it was really nice. But
It was though. It really was towards the end of the physical media boom. Like the
yeah,
and like physical media has kept on, but there was that point where the extras were in many ways more detailed than the film itself.
oh yeah. I mean, the Rings is well, Peter Jackson in general since the Rings trilogy. every one of his movies has been meticulous in the amount of material available. I mean, King Kong, both editions of that followed the same format of copious extras.
Hmm.
The Hobbit movies did the same. It's part of why I've always been kind of gutted he never got around. He could never get his Dam Busters film off the ground because that would have
Yeah.
been spectacular. But uh, but yeah, he really managed to leave the medium in a way that it's not just that very few creators can do, but it's that very few creators are given the resources to do.
Mm.
But the documentation of the making of the Rings trilogy is, I think, still pretty impressive. I don't think even the Star Wars movies have come close to it because it was never
No.
really as planned with those. And there's certainly a lot more candor with the Middle Earth material.
Mm.
I was quite taken with how, when it came to the Hobbit movies, they were quite open about the fact in the behind the scenes material that Ian McKellen in the bag end material had a bit of a bad time of things, and
Yeah.
which I understand completely because it was this big shift that had gone on, and they to do it, what they wanted to do with him in with Gandalf in the scene, it's not as easy as what they did in Fellowship, where it was just either him and one or two other characters. When you have him and 13 other characters, you kind of need to insert him separately. It, and I can't imagine what it must have been like for him acting in basically a green screen room that was all just kind of he had to. I know he's an actor, so you kind of assume that that's part of the job. But I cannot imagine how hard it must have been for him to have to be acting against people in a completely different room.
It's also as well just the fact that there was no almost token detail around him,
Mm,
which I think is really sad because you
yeah.
could have, even if you'd put in screens opposite him so he was facing something that he could
Mm,
see, so it'd be off camera. But then again, that ties into an awful lot of stuff around the Hobbit films, which
yeah.
which didn't go as well as people would hope. And but
No.
should we? I tell you what, we can keep going on about this. In
Let's
fact,
get the films right,
I,
shall
I
we?
get I get the feeling there's going to be a lot of general talk about
Mm,
the film whilst the film's going on. So, folks, this is not going to be play by play. We're not reacting to this because we've seen this film before, and we're not going to barrage you with a lot of the standard "Hey, did you know?" because, well, as we said, we've watched these DVDs, and so
yeah.
most people who are listening to this will probably be more interested in us bantering about stuff related to the film as opposed to blow by blow on the film itself.
Yeah. But for anyone who's interested, we're about to hit play. The version we are watching this evening is courtesy of iTunes. Now, it's currently set at 8 seconds on the New Line logo. So if you want to start playing from that point, we'll be more or less synced up. But like Adam said, we're not going to be really doing a play by play. There are probably going to be points we jump out and go, that was cool. But we've watched these films so many times, and I'm sure you folks have as well. This is more or less just giving a bit of extra fluff as we
Mm.
want to do. So away we go. Oh, there we go. Much better. Ah, delightful.
That was known as controlled chaos.
Ah, isn't it just? I was trying so hard to make sure I had the film keyed up, ready to put on.
Much like, oh, look at it, look at this for a tie into the fluff. Much like the Primarchs in their gestation tubes, the Chaos Gods did fling the Lord of the Rings stream off to the heavens.
Ah, isn't it boy?
So let's starting with this.
Mm,
Prior to this film hitting,
yeah.
what was your history with Tolkien?
Okay. I had been bought a collected edition of Lord of the Rings and copies of The Hobbit and The Silmarillion by my mum
Hmm.
by way of one of the old BCA book club back in the day.
Oh, okay.
And when I was in secondary school, I made a I started trying reading through it, and I'll be honest, I struggled a bit initially because there were bits that I bounced off of more than others. but I read the trilogy. I've read it every few years, pretty much since then. It's not my favorite Tolkien work. My favorite is actually the Silmarillion. That's kind of what really jammed for me, but that's because it's much more of a book of myths and folklore,
Okay.
which is where it, which is what I really do adore, to be honest. Myths and
Yeah.
folklore, and it just the way that the story of Middle Earth was built, I found fascinating. Even though I love the story of Lord of the Rings, the Silmarillion just struck better for me. After that, I got bought. I think I've got an Atlas of Middle Earth book. She bought me from the same book club,
Okay.
which I found wonderful. I've still got it around here somewhere. Uh, and then when I heard about the film, I can't remember. I think I did hear about the films going into production, but it was the first trailer they revealed in Christmas 2000, I want to say,
Yeah.
on an old Yahoo disc. Actually, was it a disc or did I actually try and watch it on Yahoo back in the days of dial-up, which was an experience?
Yes.
But that first trailer that revealed the Fellowship walking across the top of the hill into focus, that blew me away because I hadn't expected to. Lord of the Rings was the great unfilmable book at that point
Mm.
because there'd been the prior attempts to do it, which hadn't. They'd always kind of failed either due to not enough money to complete it or they'd just been incomplete in some way.
Yeah.
And to find out that Peter Jackson, the director at that point, was mostly known for Brain Dead, Meet the Feebles, and he'd done The Frighteners a few years before. I think that's what got him the gig more than
Mm.
anything. Plus, he Weta Workshop, who he was I think he co-founded it with Richard Taylor.
Didn't they found it for the movie?
No, because it was running before that. Because a lot of the special effects,
Okay.
because they actually one of the contentious things that prior to production on Lord of the Rings starting, Weta had been the primary effects team working on Hercules and Xena,
Ah, okay.
which filmed in New Zealand.
Yeah.
So when filming started, that was all Weta basically did. They couldn't afford to they couldn't do work on anything else. So you can actually tell there's a slight change in the production quality of both shows, and that's purely because Weta were out of the picture, so they had to bring in completely new special effects houses.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
yeah, it was a. I remember it was quite a thing at the time because Raimi and the team behind those shows were a little put out, but equally, no one can really blame Weta because, well, who wouldn't want to work on Lord of the Rings? Let's
Hmm.
be fair. And this is still benchmark stuff, what they did here.
Now you mentioned obviously getting the books,
Mm,
getting stuff as presents, but if I'm honest, do you think that Lord of the Rings was in the public consciousness that much? Because like looking like now, of course, we
yeah.
can't ever imagine being free of Lord of the. It's always been
Yeah.
around, but
Prior to this, not as much. I mean, I can remember bookshops would normally have several different editions of the books available on the shelves.
mm,
You would not find a bookshop that didn't have Tolkien on the bookshelf.
yeah,
That never changed. But in the run up and especially after the movies, the sheer number of editions magnified massively. But Christopher Tolkien, he was he'd been putting out the history of Middle Earth books for most of them. I can't remember. I'm not sure when he started, but they were certainly still coming out
yeah,
when the film came out because they were an ongoing project of his. There were always new editions. been released in some form. I mean, my editions have. I think I've got Alan Lee cover for the Lord of the Rings trilogy and John Howe covers for Hobbit. No, Alan Lee's Smile cover for the Hobbit, and the Silmarillion is John Howe's cover of the Sack of Gondolin.
Okay.
So, but there were other editions after that. They were just the ones that I knew most. And,
Mm.
and I mean, they had presence. I mean, Games Workshop had done the Lord of the Rings miniatures in the 80s. They had done a set of a Nazgul and uh, one of their beasts. They'd done the Fellowship. And actually, for the longest time, they were how I pictured the Fellowship being, to be fair. Those
Yeah,
original miniatures.
like GW's relationship, it's weird, isn't it? Because GW
Mm,
had this relationship with the license, which is obviously very important. I mean, it saved it at times.
yeah.
It's also caused it all sorts of problems at times.
Yep.
But at the same time, GW liberally not stole, but because some of the things that Tolkien did, so for
Mm,
instance, elves, everyone, if you say elves to anyone nowadays, they're going to think these long, tall, elegant,
yeah.
creatures, whereas elves in fiction were small, almost what we would think of as imps.
Well, I mean, it varies. But Tolkien's great skill was he was able he took a lot of different mythologies
Yeah.
and to build Middle Earth. And the thing I always find hilarious is that for the most part, it was purely a language exercise originally,
Yeah.
and then he only started writing things down because his son started. He was telling his kids the stories before bed, and his son started pointing out where he was making mistakes and not being consistent, which I just find absolutely adorable, to be honest.
But also an extremely tough audience. If you're
Oh yeah.
knackered, you're going to bed and you're like, look, just go to sleep. I want a story. 5 minutes
Mm,
later, you got that wrong. It's clearly this, father.
yeah. Yeah. But he did take. I mean, the elves are much more. They're a bit more to the fae folk of these islands than the elves of mainland Europe.
Mm,
His dwarves are very much an amalgamation of that stereotype that exists mainly across northern Europe with a bit of British rolled in.
yep.
But it it's a fascinating world that you built, and I mean there's a lot original to it, and it's not surprising that the likes of Games Workshop did take from it.
Mm.
I mean, Alric is effectively the anti-Tolkien character. I think Moorcock's even said that on occasion. That's why he created the character to be the anti-elf. He's an elf, but he's a misanthrope.
Yeah.
He's wasted. He's always ill. It's it's not exactly an uncommon idea for other people to take bits of Tolkien and play with
Oh
it.
no, no. It was. I mean, let's face it. That's another reason why I sort of asked about your experience,
Mm,
because so many people. It's like John Carpenter on Mars. So many
yeah.
people had taken elements from Tolkien. He was so influential that there was not only this idea that the books themselves were unfilmable,
Mm,
but also there was that slight element of, do we need to do this
mm,
because it's been done? And let's not forget as well, so I think, as you said, there was like a slight, there was a teaser around Christmas of
yeah.
2000. The actual trailer came out in April, but the big event in December 2000 was another film from New Line. It was the infamous Dungeons and Dragons film.
Oh yeah.
And I just love to think that one studio produced Fellowship of the
Yeah.
Ring and Dungeons and Dragons in the same year.
Oh, that's I'd actually forgotten that. That's genuinely hilarious. I was actually thinking of Dungeons and Dragons because I was just racking my head a minute because one of the things that is easy to forget is that in popular culture,
Mm,
in terms of films and whatnot, for most people, when If you ask them to name a fantasy film, they'd think up before Lord of the Rings came out, The Fellowship. If you'd ask them to think of a fantasy film or think fantasy, they'd be more inclined to think Conan or the swords, that heroic style of fantasy that permeated the 80s, swords and sorcery stuff.
Yep.
Because people really didn't even try to adapt the high fantasy that Tolkien is kind of like the flag bearer for. There's plenty of it in fiction. I mean, my bookshelf, ignoring what you could find in the average bookstore in the late 80s, mid 90s, my bookshelf alone is rammed with fantasy of that isn't GW in any way, but has more than a hint of the Tolkien about it.
Yeah.
Mainly because it's easier to write it. Trying to put it on film, one of the reasons is it's harder because the thing is, fantasy and sci-fi have always differed. Into sci-fi, you can cheat because it's the future, effectively.
Yeah.
Star Wars, ignore it for a second, but still, same principle. Whereas with fantasy movies, unless you're very clever or you can hide what you're not able to actually put on film properly, you need all that money because it's basically making a historical film.
Yeah.
And so you need to have the costumes, the weapons, the armor to have had just enough money put into them so that they do look right and people can't have the illusion broken. And so much fantasy, and this is where a lot of fantasy movies have gone wrong, in that, well, they do break the illusion quite easily. Dungeon Dragons is one. There's a raft of them from the 80s where they're so cheap that they've not even tried to hide their mistakes. In fact, in some odd cases, they're part of the charm.
Yeah. It's funny because I looked up a little list of films just from 97 to 99, and I
Mm,
typed in fantasy to see what would come up. And I mean, for a start, you're absolutely right. The sort of the legit, what I would call serious fantasy,
mm,
it's just not there.
yeah,
You did obviously you had films like Hercules, so and there was Princess Mononoke, so you did get fantastical films, and you had I never saw this, but Cull the Conqueror with Kevin
yeah,
Sorbo,
yeah, yeah.
and get this, Snow White: A Tale of Terror with Sam Neill and Sigourney Weaver.
Oh, that's one of those Hallmark shows, isn't it?
Is it?
I think it is
Great.
because Hallmark had a run of doing surprisingly good fantasy shows, like mini prestige miniseries. It was either
Oh,
Hallmark or HBO. I get those confused sometimes, especially for that period. But you had like the Tenth Kingdom. You had uh, the Odyssey.
okay.
Uh, you had Jason and the Argonauts. There was a whole Sam Neill again showed up in Merlin, which was part of that whole crop.
Mm,
Some of these are a little bit they they kind of skew either side of Lord of the Rings, to be fair. But
yeah.
it was mainly in that sort of TV area, especially high end cable, that would even attempt it. And even then, they did feel a little like stage shows, shall we say? So
Is that they were so focused on being prestige that they almost, yeah, they almost made the sets look like it was, yeah, a high end play.
yeah, I mean a very high end, but you didn't. I mean, this feels lived
Oh yeah, absolutely.
in a way that very few fancy films, even today, manage. So I'm still kind of impressed with how they. I mean, I know we said we weren't going to get into film, but this is just seamless to me. How it goes from that digital composite of Ian Holm and Ian McKellen, where they're in reality they were both the same height more or less, and to
Mm,
go from to have them interact seamlessly is. two vastly different heights. It's I, I I adore it. It's fantastic.
One of the things that for a small period of time Peter Jackson was allowed to get away with,
Mm,
and that was this idea of, well, we're doing the Hobbit, sorry, we're doing the Lord of the Rings, we're doing Tolkien's world. We don't really have that much money,
mm,
especially for the whole films, considering how many effects are involved.
mm.
So we have to try and figure this out intelligently and use a lot of tricks. And it's very much, it sounds odd, this, but it's almost like the Ryan Reynolds way of, like, we'll do it on a small budget because that makes us more inventive.
Yeah.
Like hearing that I know this sounds a bit weird to mention this now, but hearing that he was told what Marvel was going to give him for Deadpool and Wolverine,
Mm,
which was still very little because he'd asked for very little.
yeah.
And then they said, right, we're actually going to make it for less. And the whole reason was, again, because like shots like this, which were done in camera,
Mm.
just there's just invention, just really smart, practical filmmaking.
Well, it's not just invention. Some of this is actually using techniques that have been around since the dawn of cinema,
Yeah,
and but have kind of people have not forgotten, but they've fallen by the wayside due to the existence of special effects,
yeah.
m- composite effects, whether they're digital or puppet based or whatever. But it's just it's wonderful, and I love the fact that with Lord of the Rings, Jackson actually he and his Philippa and Fran they planned it to be two films,
Yes.
and then New Line head of New Line looked at the pros and said, "Well, you know this is three films, right?" So they went away with an offer if they could make it as three films, which is I I'm not sure that's really happened before, where someone's cut a thing down to two, and they've said, "Well, no, you can make three. Go on, you know you want to."
Do you remember who they were going to make the two films with originally?
Oh,
And I know, by the way, people listening to this, I know this is kind of mining DVD stuff, I know,
hmm.
but this is something that has really stuck with me.
Oh, didn't they go? Wasn't it going to be Weinstein originally?
That's it. Yeah, they
Yeah,
had a,
yeah.
a two picture deal with Miramax, and they wanted three, but
Mm.
Miramax would only give them two. And but Miramax, and this is crazy, they said if you can get a studio to make three for you, then we'll shake hands and you can go off with them.
Yeah,
And I'm like, oh, thank goodness,
yeah,
considering the future, because
absolutely.
the last thing we wanted is Miramax to get more power and wealth and
Mm,
etc. But yeah, amazing. And New Line as well, because like you mentioned earlier as well, like Peter Jackson. For those who don't know, because again, it's weird this age relative thing.
mm.
This came out 2001. That's that's a couple of decades ago now. There are people listening to this who were not alive when this was at cinemas, which scares me.
Yeah, yes, it is.
The fact was that Peter Jackson was barely known at all. I mean, yes, he had certain fans. At the time, Peter Jackson was known for doing stuff like Meet the Feebles, which was a sick and twisted version of the Muppets. It was like the Muppets with gore and rude jokes and sex jokes. Think kind of slightly more extreme James Gunn, but crossed with the Muppet Show, that sort of thing. So he'd come from that background, and he developed through the system, and he'd done other things, and then he did the Frighteners. And the Frighteners is a bit of an odd one because there are a lot of stylistic choices and things that you can take from the Frighteners and go, oh, I see where bits of Lord of the Rings came from. I can see where maybe the ring wraiths came from, or where the use of low budget special effects and high budget special effects. Using what you have to hand to make a really atmospheric film when you have a very, very small budget. And of course, added to that was that around that time, I believe before filming started, actually, Michael J. Fox had announced to the world that he had developed Parkinson's, which is something that has affected my family in the years since. But The Frighteners was kind of his last main big feature film. I think he'd done Doc Hollywood beforehand, and he was doing other things like Spin City. Things were going on in the background. But the reality was that when I heard about The Frighteners, it was as much about Michael J. Fox as anything else. And at the time, I'd not gotten around to seeing The Frighteners in cinemas, so I didn't know exactly what it was about. I just heard it was good. And then suddenly, the next thing I hear is this guy is then going to be tackling Lord of the Rings. But yeah, so you've got this director who hasn't really, although he's done fantasy stuff, it's been with a gore tint, and he's done fantastical stuff, and he's done elements of horror, and he's done bits and bobs. But
Mm.
then the next thing you know, he's like doing Lord of the Rings, which, like at the time as well, people listening, there had been very much like 40K, there had been an attempt to make a feature film before. It
Yep.
had been done using a form of animation. The guy who did the Lord of the Rings film, Ralph Bakshi, it was a success financially, but they only made basically half, or would you say
Uh,
third, a third to a half, because they did the
yeah.
first, the what you would call the Fellowship, I
Mm.
suppose, and then that was it, and then they never got a chance to make any more. But because they didn't know if they were going to make any more, Fellowship had to have more of an ending
Yeah.
in the Bakshi Carter. Is that a fair way to say it? Because
I think that's fair. And to be honest, if you're going to do one as a standalone, Fellowship is for one to do. 'Cause one of the issue things that made it always a daunting prospect to film is the fact that for Two Towers and Return of the King, a lot of the events don't happen at the same time in the books.
yeah,
Frodo and Sam's journey across Two Towers and Return of the King is massively out of sync with the journeys of the rest of the Fellowship on their mission. So
mm.
the amount of work to rejig that to make it fit is it was not inconsiderable, shall we say? But yeah, I'm trying to remember. Was it didn't Jackson? Did they get the rights themselves, him and his production company, and then that's why they did this? Then they shopped it around to the studios.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a long story on they got the rights
Mm.
because the rights as well was something that, I mean, the Tolkien family have never been happy with anyone having control of any part of
No.
the rights apart from themselves.
Mm.
And I think it was Christopher who disliked these films intensely, saying
Mm.
that they were made to sell toys and action figures, and they were all about action, which I
Uh,
don't.
I no. I respect his. I've respected his opinion as his father's son, and the the guardian of the estate, so
Mm,
to speak. And one of the things I want to get onto later is how, yeah, the team they did make quite a lot of cuts and changes to the story to make it fit a feature film
yes,
environment. But I do not think in the slightest they've ramped up action or used it to sell action figures. I mean, not in the slightest. So,
it's crazy, isn't it? Because you have that on the one hand, and then obviously the family sold the rights to whatever it is that Amazon are basing their shows on.
well,
Is
that
that
that's
the
part.
appendices?
No, that's the fun. Well, it's the appendices to Lord of the Rings, because that's where some of the issue with the Rings of Power production comes into play. Because it's Amazon MGM, and if I remember
Okay.
right, MGM were part of the team that produced the Hobbit movies,
Mm.
which is how they've ended up with that part of the rights. But the film rights they have only include the Hobbit, the Lord of the Rings, and the appendices to Lord of the Rings. They cannot use anything from the Silmarillion.
Oh.
Yes, and the thing for me is that my dream when I heard about Rings of Power was I was really hoping it would actually be the Silmarillion adapted because I in my head I've always pictured it as being you could do it as this, especially when Game of Thrones came out. Picture it as this prestige series, a finite lifespan, and you can base it. There are certain arcs you can do initially, and then a lot of the stories cross over,
Yeah.
and that makes it much easier to weave a longer series out of things with these different arcs that crisscross. But they've had to limit themselves to what is in the books, in those 3 books, well, 4 books that have already been adapted, and what's in those films.
Mm.
So I've actually been, I mean, I've just finished watching season 2 of Rings of Power a week or two back, and I watched season 1 almost in one hit. I think I watched like the first half of it after it came out, and then the rest of it as it released weekly.
Hmm.
And then I watched all of season 2 as it came out week by week. Season 1 has its weak spots, but it's nowhere near as bad as people claim. Season 2 is a spectacular step up. And what I really admire is how no, if it does help to know about what they've had to do, that they are having to work within certain confines. But what they've crafted so far, I found really quite impressive and
Yeah.
true to the story that Tolkien told. And I know that a lot of people not have been saying about how the timeline's being compressed because there are some events, but yeah, they take place over best part of several centuries at a minimum. Or there are characters they don't understand how they're there. But then people forget that for all these films are wonderful and spectacular, and like I said, this is one of my favorite movies. It chops a they've chopped a lot out. I mean, off the top of my head, Tom Bombadil and the Barrow Wights completely gone. And
We're
in
gonna have to talk about Tom in a second, but
yeah,
yeah.
they swapped Glorfindel for Arwen,
Yep.
which is a big move. Let's see what else. Uh, they in Two Towers, Aemir is supposed to be at Helm's Deep on the walls with Aragorn.
Hmm.
'Cause it's part of their arc that they fight back to back. Faramir is supposed to refuse the ring as soon as it's handed to him, but they felt that didn't it it lessened the ring's impact, which again I understand.
Yeah, you need a little tweak there.
Yeah, so Jackson and Co made a lot of tweaks and changes to make the films work, and they were still working on things even after the film was finished. Because I mean, they had Arwen show up at Helm's Deep.
Yeah.
You can still see shots of Liv Tyler wearing a combination of Alf and Rohan armor.
Mm.
And honestly, I'd have loved to have seen some of her scenes together. To be fair, I mean, there's bits in the caves underneath Helm's Deep with Eowyn that have been completely removed. The timelines all over the place. Because I mean, this scene with Frodo and Gandalf, there's supposed to be like a 10, 20 year gap between this and when they next meet,
Yeah.
and it's more like a month or two as the film goes. So it's an interesting conversation, but I do think I think Rings of Power's had a bit of an unfair rap because the cast involved have been, I think, doing sterling work.
I
And
I think the challenge they've had, I mean, apart from the fact that it was on Amazon,
mm,
which, anyone listening, especially, from the fluff, the one of the biggest problems with anything in Games Workshop on Amazon is that it's Amazon.
mm,
And so the moment that Rings of Power was announced, plus you had backlash from people who were going, look, you've got these 3 films, why are you trying to expand it? it looked as well. It was done for money. You know, it had
Mm.
that purpose. Amazon wants to make money, so they bought this. So that worked against it. And for me, I think the biggest challenge was that they made Galadriel not the friendliest. I think so driven by her
Mm.
quest that she doesn't have that warm first impression. And funnily enough, the one of the series that I can remember the lead character starting off so brittle was Star Trek Discovery,
Yeah, yeah.
where the lead character, and by the third season, the lead character is like relaxed
Mm.
and then you empathize a bit more, and those scenes where they're struggling. But I think with Rings of Power, with the focus as well on Galadriel, and I think they wanted to make her so powerful at the beginning that kind of worked against them. And
Well,
it's almost like because if you
mm,
think about it, the people we meet at the start of this adventure are the smallest people, are the weakest
yeah.
people, are and even even Gandalf in a bit as well. He will do the first many times where he reaches for something that's powerful and then backs off because he knows it's
Yeah.
too powerful.
Well, the interesting thing about Rings of Power is that by the end of season two, Galadriel is much more in. She's moved much more towards where we see her in
Yeah,
the films, and I get it because they wanted to give her an arc, and honestly, she doesn't have one in the Silmarillion. Not, not that's easy to get across, because really her story, for the most part, is Fëanor. She denies Fëanor a lock of her hair. She joins the exodus of the Noldor and it takes part in the burning of the ships. She travels across the ice floe
hmm
with her brother and their force to Middle Earth, and then she meets Celeborn,
mm,
and that's kind of it until they decamp to Lothlorien, and she gets her ring. There's actually not a lot of meat there, so they wanted to, and given that they did have restrictions on what characters they could use,
yeah,
knowing that they had, I mean, Elrond and Galadriel are the two elves that survive through to the rings that
yeah,
they could use easily. And so picking them, and especially the way they've paired Galadriel with Sauron, spoilers, throughout these first two seasons, with the sterling work of the actor playing Sauron, it's it's actually been pretty spectacular seeing his shifting personalities. But I think it's actually stuff that they were right. They needed to do that. Making Galadriel a commander of the elven armies was a step that it actually does make sense for her character if you've read the Silmarillion up to the point where she and her family leave
mm.
for West, leave the Undying Lands. So, I mean, the only criticism I have is that so far we've not met Celeborn. We don't know if he's alive, if they're already married or not, or if they're going to shift things along so they meet much later. Which again, I'll be interested to see how that works. But it's been interesting.
Mm.
The criticism I understand fully. I get them. But it's one of the cases where they've put the work in to make it understandable why they've done that. So it's one of my things. I have no problem with a show getting knocked for it being bad, but I do prefer for people just to give it a chance and let it run its course. 'Cause nowadays you don't shows aren't given that chance, which I think is a shame.
Well, let's face it. If I mean, actually, this ties into a discussion. I heard on the underbase. I think as Andy was saying about, for instance, Discovery season one, and Discovery
Mm,
season one did not go down well. And I think you said something about TNG, but TNG season one, although it got some viewers, it was roundly hated by a lot of people.
Yeah,
And
it's a pretty bad first season.
it's although like you said, I think your favorite was Deep Space Nine. I know it was Andy's,
Hmm.
and you mentioned that DS9 has the best of the first seasons out of I think most of the tracks.
The only one that beats it now is Stranger Worlds, but
Mm,
I mean, Stranger Worlds is only working on like 10 or 11 episodes max per season,
yeah,
and it came out of the gates having established three of the three leads in Discovery across multiple episodes, and
so they
they
got
kind
their
of
work already done,
yeah,
kind
and
of.
they kind of knew what they wanted to do with Stranger Worlds, whereas Discovery, like I said in the Moonbase 2 podcast, had first off they went through two showrunners in that first year.
Mm,
Uh, they didn't. I think they ended up settling on the showrunner for the last three seasons, but the first 2 years they did. There was a lot of chopping and changing. Shorter seasons, so you had that change of focus. Shorter seasons. It's also the first track that the main focus has been a single character in
mm,
Michael Burnham, which hasn't been the case in any other Trek show before. Where normally it's all, although you do have the lead character or the lead trio, it's always more of an ensemble performance.
yeah,
But with Discovery, they they wanted to make it about Michael Burnham, which I get.
mm,
That's actually a really novel way to look at to do things. And she was supported by the wonderful Michelle Yeoh and the great Doug Jones, who arguably rose quite quickly to co-star status as opposed to supporting star quite readily. The detriment is that Discovery has a really well designed bridge crew in that it's full of characters who look great and when they get a chance to do stuff are good characters. But there's no episodes where you get to learn anything about them.
yeah.
And even in I mean, it was I think late season 4 where we learned that the con officer has a history as a boxer. So Burnham makes use of that, and that just kind of comes out of nowhere. And and then season 5, it even they lose half the bridge crew for the back half of it because they didn't know the show was ending. So the actors weren't available, so they thought they'd be able to bring them back in the next season.
Oh wow.
So it's
So,
yeah, but they did shoot an extra scene at the end of the finale
oh, well,
with
like a token scene, but
yeah, they got all the bridge crew back for a farewell scene amongst them, but
yeah.
it was kind of all they could do, unfortunately, because of how they found out the show was ending,
Mm.
which does suck because Discovery it took its time to find its feet, but I generally found I enjoyed Discovery for most of its run. So
It would have been so easy then for this film to have been mishandled because we talk about
mm,
the series Rings of Power had problems with its first season, and
yeah,
unfortunately as well, the perception, especially online media, has changed massively since this
mm,
film came out. So I think this film would have gotten a very different reception. I wouldn't have been negative, but it just would have been handled differently. Like
yeah,
if this came out today, the big thing online would be, oh, finally they do stuff proper. They do it proper. It's not this rubbish. It's the sort of praise that Space Marine 2 is getting at the moment. It's
mm.
this is a proper game, this is how it should be. But at
You,
the time, there's like
you'd probably have
fantasy.
people
Gone.
you'd probably have people moaning about how they didn't include Tom Bombadil, fake fans.
Well, yes and no, because this is kind of why I went off down this kind of
Mm,
particular pathway because this is an adaptation of the book.
Yes.
and so many other adaptations have failed. And
Mm.
what I liked about this is that when say they've taken out a character or they've taken out a scene, but if they need to backfill or do something with another scene, they'll find a way to bring some of that
Yeah.
dialogue back. And
Absolutely.
so the book is almost filling in the gaps of the book,
Yeah.
which I think is brilliant.
And you used the key word there, adaptation. It's
Yes.
not the be all and end all. This is a team's interpretation of the Lord of the Rings, and it's something I wish more people would kind of get their head around. That no, there is always room for another interpretation of things. Nothing is set in stone. So, I mean, I would love to see another team that's maybe another within this decade, probably a bit longer, take another stab at Lord of the Rings. Go ahead, give it a
Yeah.
shot. I'd love to see it. Try and animate it again. Do some, and there's far too much of feeling beholden to things, to the text, especially nowadays. Whereas so many book adaptations over the years have not been true. They've not hewn closely to the text. They've been judicious in trimming, finding stuff that works better in a different medium, because it is a completely different medium on film as much as it's a different medium to TV. You have
Mm.
to make things work in that environment. And there is stuff that won't work. And you just have to go, yeah, we need to get rid of this. But like you said, if you can keep the essence of it and find a way to use bits of what you did have to cut in a different way. And honestly, a lot of folks don't even probably wouldn't even know that you cut something. I mean, most folks who came to Lord of the Rings in the cinemas hadn't read the books.
Yep.
They probably had heard of them, but they'd probably never read them. Or if they had done, it was a long time prior. So,
I would say most people hadn't read the books. I think more people said they'd read them than actually read them.
yeah.
And at the time as well, goes back to my first question actually, because I think at the time it was seen very much like saying, "Oh, I'm going to do a sci-fi film next," and you'd be like, "Oh, great, cool. What's the story?" And you go, "Oh, it's an Isaac Asimov story," and then people
Yeah.
go, "Oh, well, not interested in that. Why? Oh, because it's just boring sci-fi." And
Hmm.
it's like it's not. It's like Tolkien had this reputation, I think, of because it was unfilmable. Some people would then read that as being unenjoyable.
Yes.
And of course, it's not the case. It's just how you translate it. Though I am going to say now that my mother to this day finds the fact that there are sausages in Middle Earth to be a complete fourth wall breaker. And she just completely just like, no, I'm sorry, that just doesn't make sense. So
What's her opinion on chips then? Because that always gets a chuckle out of me later on where Sam and Gollum are having their set to about potatoes.
I think anything to do with food, I think she's I will say it's sorry, was it it's John Howe and Alan Lee, isn't it? Because
Yes.
I
Yeah.
sometimes get them the other way wrong. Right. So Alan Lee, I think it was about 10, 15 years ago, there was another Lord of the Rings book released
Mm.
because of some found documents.
Uh, well, over the last, really since the films,
Mm,
they've had several hardback editions of stories from the Silmarillion and
mm,
the untold stories that most of them Christopher Tolkien had kind of gone through his father's notes and scripts, and he edited them together into really more complete stories.
yeah.
So they'd had the Children of Húrin, the Fall of Gondolin, uh, the Tale of Beren and Luthien, I think, were the three. There might have been a fourth one, I can't remember, to be fair.
Mm,
Those are the three that I remember. Uh, each one was they were not small books. I mean, they came out in hardback,
Mm.
had very nice covers, all new artwork by I, f- I can't remember which way around it was, but I know Alan Lee did at least one of the covers. John Howe, I think, did between them they did covers for both those two books, or both for all four of the books that they did put out. And I mean, I thought they were really quite nice ways of bringing these tales to an audience who probably wouldn't have read them otherwise, because they are contained either in the Silmarillion or the Untold stories. So they're a bit harder to dig out.
Okay. I think I'm just having a look here. Yes, so the Children of Hurin, when that came out, I went to an Alan Lee signing,
Oh, nice.
and because Lord of the Rings was a film that my mother fell in love with
Hmm.
very very much. It was like we always had a lot of shared like filmic interests anyway, but she really
Yeah.
went for this.
Hmm.
But when I went to the signing, I realized you could only like get one book signed.
Hmm.
So I got him to sign it to my mother. But my mother's name is Heather, and I asked him to write to Heather, mother of Adam, which he was happy to do, even though like the person before me blatantly asked for a sketch,
Hmm.
which is really poor show, and
It,
everyone
it,
was a
it,
bit miffed off.
yeah, that's kind of a bit
Yeah.
taking a liberty.
So the fact that I was just like, look, I don't want to sketch. I'm not going to take your time up. There's too many
Hmm.
people waiting anyway. And then I asked him to sign it to my mother, and he was over the moon. He thought that was really nice. But the weirdest
Oh,
thing
bless.
is that book is in my mother's will, even though it's not got significant value. But no, it's so important for her to make sure that comes to me.
That's
That
awesome, dude.
she's
That's
put she
that's
put that in.
wonderful.
It's a crazy thing, but it's those little touches.
Hmm.
I also have a cousin, and this is a sad thing, and I wish I could
Hmm.
say that I have not done this myself,
Hmm.
but I don't believe she has to date seen the third film
Really?
because she does not want it to end.
I can kind of see where she's coming from, Bev. I have a thing where I own there are a few authors that I kind of grew up with, and when they passed, I might own their final book, but I've never read it. Uh, Specifically, David Gemmell and Terry Pratchett. I have their final books. I've never even opened them. I can't.
I have the final watch book from Pratchett. I've never read it. I just cannot bear to do it.
Yeah, I've read everything up to. It was the last book with Tiffany Aiken, I think, was his final Rings
Mm.
book, and it's on a shelf somewhere. I've got Gemmell. He was doing his Troy series, and his wife helped. She finished off the last book, but I've not read it. I just can't. I it's a case of I know what it is. It's part of me not wanting to say goodbye to those authors.
Yeah,
I know that there's nothing going to be left
yeah.
afterwards.
There are no secrets. There are no
Yeah,
treasures. Yeah, no,
yeah,
it's perfectly understandable. I I kind of feel as well. I mean, think about the hobby that we are interested in, be it law, be it plastic, be it whatever
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
way you come to 40K. Part of the attraction is that there are treasures in terms of knowledge, in terms of lore, in terms of stories, in terms of characters that you will never get the answers to. So you
yeah,
always have that potential.
yeah. I think it's partly why I'm so enamored with GW universes, for the fact that they are settings where you will never know everything.
Mm.
Not just because you can't, but because they're designed so you can't. they're open ended in that way that a lot of the secrets and mysteries are there to be mysteries. They're not supposed to be answered and have everything revealed.
It's true. And once it's revealed and once everything is there, you just feel, well, it's nice in the moment, but then afterwards it's like, well,
Mm,
kind of prefer we didn't. So, but no, it's, and the thing is as well that I because I spoke to them about this. I said there's always other books, there's other tales,
mm,
but I think it's this cinematic universe, and it's weird because there was the obviously the different, like the way the Hobbit was produced was very different
mm,
to this. The way that the Hobbit came into being, it seemed a little bit more calculated by various people in power. The stuff
mm.
that stuff that happened with Guillermo and stuff,
Yeah,
and then the shooting of it, and you kind of felt that
it was a film that
it,
Jackson felt he had to make rather than he wanted to.
yeah, and he was kind of pushed to make it, and I think it took a real toll on him.
It did. I mean, you can tell in a lot of the behind the scenes material on The Hobbit that it, he was really quite stressed. I mean, the thing is, it was a much shorter lead time than
Yeah.
he had on Lord of the Rings. The production itself was much more stressful, and the thing is, I actually have a soft spot for the Hobbit films. I don't disagree with some folks who think that who say that they'd rather it was one film or just two and edited down. But I quite like a lot of the extra material because it's stuff that really, bar if maybe there are maybe two scenes at most that I'd happily cut. But for the most part, I'm actually fairly happy with most of what you get in those films because a
Hmm.
lot of what they put in was trying to expand what was actually a fairly light book and give a bit more nuance to things to make it fit more in the world that they established in these films.
Yeah, because that was the weird and wonderful thing about the way these books were written is that The Hobbit was a kid's book and
Mm,
written as a kid's book, and then when he got around to writing this, he just he just got a little bit more. His heights were a little bit further. He'd done more study into the things. He wanted to tell a bigger story, but
mm,
it wasn't like he purposely sat down with an agent and went, "I'm going to make it this big to sell this many copies and do this." It's like, no, this is the way it turned out. But you ended up then with this kid's tale and Lord of the Rings, and they're both in the same universe. It's the same
yeah.
story, just but the tone of the books is markedly different.
Mm,
And trying to make, I mean, I do wonder what would have happened if they just made the one film for The Hobbit and just
yeah.
done it as a kids film. But like a serious kids film as well,
Mm,
a film that respected its youthful audience.
absolutely. Because there is a tendency to, especially for modern films, to not give kids the credit they deserve.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot of time for the How to Train Your Dragons movies. I didn't initially because I didn't understand, and then I finally sat down and watched the first film, maybe a year or two after it came out, and I watched it and I was like, "Oh, now I understand. This is actually a really good. It's a comp. It's not talking down to the kids. It's telling it a straight story. It just happens to be a kids movie, but it's not talking down to them about anything. So
And those films get emotionally, they get heavy by the end, but
yeah,
they're still kids films, which I
yeah,
love it. I think it's fantastic. It does, it shows that it's like when people talk about horror. Funnily enough, it's
mm,
the same thing with Stranger Things. At the time as well, the makers were talking about like the horror elements and
mm,
the fact that it's kids, and it's like, well, kids kids experience a lot of horror
yeah,
because when they're young, they're scared of a lot of stuff. Now, that fear is just as powerful to an adult as it is a kid. Now, a kid, often the fear is the unknown, or the misunderstanding or
Mm.
the imagining of something scary. Whereas the adult, it's often real horror, as in there is this danger, there is this fear, this will happen if we don't do this. But neither of them is, you can't say one of them is somehow worse than the other.
Yeah.
And so have to deal with this all the time. So if you treat kids with respect and you show the horror that they feel, then that is still a palpable thing. And the reason I say that is because the way that the wraiths are handled here, I think is very much a kid's feeling of horror.
Oh yeah, they are a spectacular creation.
They are just even just on horses, they are brilliant. I'd argue as well, horses is their prime form.
Yeah. The the winged beast riding versions of them, they do little something. The Black Riders, that's a
Yeah.
pretty sweet look for them.
If anyone is listening, by the way, and because we're recording this 22nd October, so you've still got time before Christmas. There is a Weta Workshop sculpture that I've wanted since the day it came out, and it is my lottery purchase, and that is Ring Wraithen's Steed. It is
Ooh.
it is the most beautiful sculpture I've ever seen. I would actually spend uh, 1,000 or two on it. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, Weta sculptures are some of the nicest collectibles you can buy, and don't they just aren't they just priced for it as well?
Well,
But yeah,
would it be fair to say that they started because okay, I'm going to waffle for a bit now.
mm,
So when this came out, fantasy was not a thing. There were fantastical films, there were fantasy books. You did not go to the cinema and immerse yourself in a fantasy world. This film hit. This was part of a double whammy of films
mm,
that were released within a month. That meant that cinema goers had no choice but to believe in fantasy.
yeah,
In November, Harry Potter was released, the first film.
yep,
And an awful lot of adults went there questioning whether they could watch a film like that and then came away going, oh, hell yeah. And this was the genius of Lord of the Rings, is that a month later, it was like, let's go see a film, but there's a bit more oomph involved, a bit more, there is more lore. It's not
mm,
straightforward. It's not as, dedicated to kids. And adults just went, oh, sign me up. And yes, there are a lot of people that got up and left. There are lots of people who were just bored. There are lots of people who made moans that it was too long and they didn't like it. And we get that. But
mm,
there was also a whole generation of film fans who saw this and went, I was never interested in fantasy. Now I am.
yeah,
And it really kicked in. And it's different as well because yes, there were the people going, oh, well, I've read the books. Have you not read the books? And of course, I'm sorry, book reading is not a big thing for a lot of people in nowadays. And I know that sounds incredibly pompous, but it's just the facts. But this film got a lot of people into trying to tackle those books.
yeah,
People who didn't read fantasy novels would willingly go out to a shop and go, hey, those 400 page books? Yeah, could I buy a couple of them, please? Because I want to read that as the first thing I've read in 16 years since high school.
yeah.
It's just, I loved it.
I
I
mean,
loved that sea change.
I worked in the bookshop from 2004 to 2009,
Mm,
and the science fiction and fantasy section during that period, it underwent. It was never as big as the crime section because crime dominates all, but it got bigger and bigger over the years I worked there. And the
yeah.
books, I mean, I had a whole unit, a center of the center aisle display unit. So about 4 foot tall, and it was almost all Tolkien, slap in the middle of the teas, just because there was so much of it, just of that stuff, let alone the other authors that were out there. And there was a real boom in, well, big epic fantasy.
Mm. What was it? A strong tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, and it's same as, I mean, the Lord of the Rings books had multiple new editions with covers over the course of the films and after, just like the Potter books had. I mean, when I started in the bookstore, they were all in the kids department. By the time
Yeah.
I finished there, we had versions specifically with adult covers in the front of the shop, and the last 3 books all had dual releases with the kids covers and the adult covers. Same books otherwise, just
The first Harry Potter book was Smarty's Children's Book of the Year. The last Harry Potter book had a recommendation on the back cover by Stephen King. And
mm,
that tells you the journey. And I
yeah.
think that by the end, I Potter would. I mean, the one thing I will say a positive for J.K. now. Apologies, folks, but she never like pulled as much from this universe as some other people did because she didn't need to.
Well, it's fun. It's fun you say that because prior to Harry Potter coming out,
Mm.
there was a Vertigo book, comic book published featuring a young wizard who wore glasses with a scar on his forehead, and yeah, she may not have cribbed off of high fantasy, but there's an argument to be made that she certainly was not as original as she made out herself out to be.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Um, Now, saying that, as much
Allegedly, by the way.
yes, allegedly, the timing is noticeable, shall we say? But for all that, one thing I will not knock is the fact that the Potter books did wonders for getting a younger generation not just into reading books, but into reading genre fiction.
Yes.
Because Harry Potter led into Hunger Games, led into Mortal Engines. You have there was a whole boom in the early 2000s of young adult science fiction and fantasy fiction, which we'd never really had before. I
Yeah.
mean, the, the closest book I remembered reading was when I was growing up was The Dark Materials by Susan Cooper. And they had a bit of a renaissance after the Potter movies hit, and they tried adapting one of the books to varying degrees. But the Potter effect and the Rings effect did translate to the younger reading market as well, which, as much as per, as I have issue with the Potter books and with their writer, I cannot deny that one, it's brought a lot of joy to millions of people, including my mum and my niece, who both
Hmm.
adore those books. But they've done wonders for getting people to read.
Yes.
And the same thing with this film, like you're saying, people came out of these films and they either went and bought copies of the Lord of the Rings books, singly or collected editions, or they went out and thought, well, that's interesting. Let's try something from this section of the shop. And they're honestly, there even at the time these came out, there were some really good books on the shelves. If you if you wanted something on in this vein, and I love that.
The other thing as well they did is a lot of adults suddenly realized that they wanted to dress up as an elf.
See, in my case, I wanted to grow my hair long and keep my beard. So
I think it was a cosplay and adults. There's it's weird. Some of the triggers. By the way, can I just say we are going to be on a record for the amount of weird segues we take.
Oh yeah.
But so a couple of years ago, I went as I think I was on a day trip to Digbeth
Mm,
in Birmingham. I think it was after I'd done something TF Nation related, and I went to a place called the Custard Factory,
mm,
which is the old area where a lot of Digbeth's premier street art is. Digbeth being a small suburb of Birmingham, which is used to be very industrial, had a lot of empty buildings and old walls, and street art really took it over. And now it's been not gentrified, but people have bought plots with these obviously empty walls in and have fenced them off to be trendy bars. So
mm.
it's a bit of an odd situation. Like the art is being pushed out, but the art bars are staying there. Very odd. Anyway, I go down there one day and there's loads of it sealed off, like tons of it. And what they were doing, they were having a Peaky Blinders convention,
Oh,
and
okay.
they had taken over an entire block, which
Wow.
technically you can do there, especially with the right permissions.
Mm.
So they had bought for the essentially for the weekend, they had bought a city block, and they had like some of the empty buildings, they'd literally populated with like the merch, but it wasn't merch. It was themed, authentic of the period. There were themed, authentic pubs, everything. And this was
Wow.
one of those kind of premier adults. You know, like you hear about occasionally you hear about like the Only Fools and Horses convention that
Mm.
charges £2,000 for a David Jason signature. And it's not a Comic Con and it's
Yeah.
not a convention because proper adults don't go to conventions. But these fools will still spend £2,000 to stand in the same relative area as a very half asleep David Jason,
Yeah.
and he will still take the money. So you had the same thing for Peaky Blinders. So you had all of these guys, all the gym bunnies, all the guys with the way too tight trousers, and they had tattoos because I mean the real like trendy guys,
Yeah.
and they're all wearing their Peaky Blinders stuff and their cheeky little hats. As Bill Burr once called it, the little rascal hat. And they're all swanning around like the bee's knees. Meanwhile, like one of the stars I saw drive into the event in a Ferrari, ready to shake it with the poor people. And I was just like, this is kind of what it led to. It led to for a start, it led to a huge research, like Comic Cons and everything for a good 15, 16 years until the pandemic. They really did profit from Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
because there was that eagerness to cosplay, that eagerness to show you're a nerd, that eagerness to show your fandom, and there was less shame because, well, if you like stuff at the cinema involving this, then why would you take the mick? And so it was. This is before this. It was still considered kind of shameful to admit that you were a nerd. Like the word nerd doesn't even really hold any power anymore
But that
because
that's not an unfair thing to say. Yeah. Even because this was post episode one, post for Matrix, and even then it was still.
it was still very, very niche.
Yeah. I mean,
The
talking about
the
Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah,
the year prior, and well, that kind of summed it up. It's one of those films that's almost embarrassed of its subject matter.
and you just didn't. Even if something was a hit, it was considered a fluke.
Hmm.
And if it was a one-off hit, they couldn't replicate it, or they would struggle to replicate it. But with this, because you had the three films come out, from the moment that the first film was a hit, and they were shooting this pretty much. I don't think they shot all three together, but I think
Uh,
they kind of did. There wasn't a huge gap between bits.
no, but
They,
they shot everything. They shot all three in one go, and then they came back for each one to do pickups in the year before each one had its main release.
cool.
So whilst they were editing it, they It's like the stuff where it's about Helm's Deep, where Arwen was part of it originally.
Yeah.
When they, I think I remember when they, because that was such an intense night shoot anyway, they had to do a few pickups to work around her. I think the
Yeah.
stuff in the extended cut of Towers with Sean Bean back as Boromir, I
Yes.
think that was a pickup as well, which is boggles my mind because it's not in the theatrical cut. It's purely for the extended, and it's a pickup shot. Mm.
It
Although
was.
part of me thinks that that's just a case of they had a day on the Osgiliath set where Sean wandered on. He had nicked a suit of armor off someone, and they thought, Sean, get on that masonry and start making a speech.
I think it was. I think it was a real fan nod. I think it was. I
Mm,
mean, again, this is the thing. Like, it was. It sounds odd to say. It's like even saying things like comics or Games Workshop. I mean, Games
mm,
Workshop, great example of this. You didn't admit that you liked Games Workshop if you were in company that wasn't in a Games Workshop or at a Comic Con. Even at the time, even 5, 10 years after this, I was out with friends. They were actually trying to set me up with someone
mm.
who I didn't want to be set up with, but she was a lovely person. She was a very, very intelligent person. She was a surgeon. She was, kind of very serious. And I was speaking to her about a lot of stuff. And then towards the end of the night, my friend, to the horror of his girlfriend, suddenly started going on, oh, Adam likes Transformers. He likes this, he likes that. And like here, this friend of mine, his girlfriend was looked at me at this sort of pleading, I'm so sorry. And you just saw the lights in this girl, this surgeon, just the lights
Yeah.
went off. And it was like almost a curt goodbye at the end of the night. And it was like, why did you say
Mm,
that? And but nowadays, like nobody gives a crap. No, this
yeah.
paved the way for like things like The Walking Dead was another thing.
Mm,
Like zombies are fantasy. They're a form of fantasy. They're horror, but they are fantastical because they don't exist. But a couple of years after this series finished, I think it was only a couple of years anyway, half of America seemed to be tuning into The Walking Dead. And
yeah.
so you lost this thing. So you end up with a generation like us who still feel a
Mm.
little bit awkward about saying in mixed company, oh well, there's Games Workshop. Like the Henry Cavill
I
attitude,
mean,
feeling a
I,
little
I,
bit awkward.
I mean, I've never had a problem telling people that I'm what I'm into, because, well, that's how my brain's wired.
Sure.
But I fully understand why folks have looked at me with like I've got two heads in that period. But it has been refreshing in the years since to find that it's become much more acceptable or
Yes.
less of an oddity. Or more to the point, everyone's been more willing to acknowledge that, you know what, yeah, I like this stuff as well. And you're right, these films did a lot of the lifting for that.
Yeah, and I think by the by the end as well, especially to the build up to Return of the King, because
Mm,
it was so powerful. I mean, yeah, as you said as well, like the first teasers came out at a time when streaming anything on the internet was a bit of a hard job, especially if you had a
yeah,
phone call going on. And then the trailer came out, and that was at the time the most downloaded trailer ever. I think
yep,
you had to download it still as well, if
yeah.
I'm not
I,
mistaken.
I
And
remember I did have a disc afterwards that had the trailer on it.
Empire or Total
Uh,
Film? I think it was
no,
Empire.
it was in one of the papers actually.
Oh wow.
It was in one of the Sunday papers because it was one of the AOL discs they gave out.
Yes, yes. Oh, I remember that.
Yes, I had to install a stupid bit of browser software to get it to load first, which was obnoxious. But yeah, it was. I think part of what helps is that these films play everything straight. There is
Yeah,
humour, but it's never taking you out of the film. Everything is still very much in,
that world.
yeah, and everything sells you on that world, which does so much of it can just be playing things straight.
Well,
You know?
here's the thing. I don't know if you remember this. I
Mm,
still have this somewhere. So I still have a an article. I think it's Sunday Times magazine,
mm,
and on the front cover is Ian in his makeup. Though
mm,
interestingly, you can actually see the mesh of the wig. So it's not a perfect.
mm,
And I've always wondered ever since whether that was intentional. But
mm,
they invited a load of journalists out about, I think it was a month or 2 months before the film, to talk about the film. So it was a pre-release
mm.
press. It was really weird the way they were doing it
Yeah.
because they had to kind of educate people. But I always remember this article because they said that when the people touched down, they'd made a whole section of this land, and it was out in the middle of nowhere,
Mm.
but they'd made Middle Earth,
Yeah.
and there was nothing. There was no fairground about it. It was Middle Earth. And so all these journalists, and because there were so many, like they hired a load of people. I think
Mm.
they used extras as well, like from the
Yeah.
films. So they weren't just like, oh, there's 5 people over here and 5 people over there. There were literally crowds of people who were completely ignoring the journalists and just doing their own thing. And there were certain times when the journalists actually got quite worried or scared about some of the things going on. But they then interviewed the various stars in various areas. And those areas would be relative to the character.
Mm.
So Liv Tyler was interviewed in this place, and she happened to be I think the main focus of the Times interview that day. And
Mm.
she was saying how wonderful it was. But you also had a little snippet from the interviewer saying he was saying to Liv how incredible this felt, how real it felt,
Yeah.
and how he kind of got the film. And that was the point. They had to educate people into,
Yeah.
hey, this is a fantasy film with elves and orcs, but it's also for adults. Oh, and there
Hmm.
are dwarfs, but there's no Snow White,
Mm.
which is so weird.
Yeah. It's actually kind of interesting because Liv was actually the biggest star in the film
Yes.
going into this. And that's easy to forget because she was on a hell of a rise. I mean, she had some big films after this as well, let's be honest.
She is her journey at this point was so weird because she
Mm.
was, she had obviously parentage.
Mm.
She'd had a huge boost. I mean, even though she went through that odd situation of finding out that the person she thought was her father wasn't her father and it was somebody else, but he was equally famous. And then she then went um, and then she sort of starred in indie films
Mm.
and sort of was going up through there. But you're right, it's like she was the one that people knew, and yet they had to get very creative to find ways into fit her into the film more.
Mm. And I understand why they did that because it is a very male-centric series of films. I mean, there's only 3 named female characters in the entire series:
Good grief.
Arwen, Galadriel, and Eowyn. They're they're
That's
the only ones
nuts.
with any real role. And in the books, Arwen, she's a plot device more than anything. And I mean, introducing Glorfindel just to basically write him off again would have been weird because you'd have to explain who he was.
Yes.
Why are we taking this dude into Mordor? Why are we taking these guys? Why can't we have the elf with the badass sword skills?
Yeah. By the way, very quickly,
Mm,
when you talk about as well gateways to fantasy and gateways to this and that,
mm,
I can say for with complete comfort that horses
mm.
were a powerful gateway to so many people. People who
Yeah,
love horses, and this is where my mother came into this. The idea of the horses and the horse riding, she was just in love with this stuff. And there were lots of people that just went nutty for it.
Yeah, I mean, the horse riding stuff in all three films is pretty spectacular, to be honest. This is a nice kind of like tease for what's going to come later on, because it's the iconic ride to the river away from the Nine, and it's just stunning stuff. I mean, Liv and the stunt double and the horses as well.
It's also something that's crafted out of nothing. It is. I mean, you think about this. It's what, maybe running across 6 acres of ground
Yeah.
in real world, and
Mm.
yet editing and design and beautiful music and just so well done.
Yeah. It's pretty spectacular. If I don't.
I just hope that the ringwraith horses were shown love. I know, because come on, let's face it as well. They're beautiful creatures, and they are playing some of the most horrific things. And of course, they're just doing the same role as the hero horses.
Yeah.
But like, if I was on set, I would have just gone, "Hey, can I go up to the can I give them an
Mm.
apple, please?" Because I'm sure they've worked really, really hard.
Yeah, because I mean, the fact they have to basically act with all that weird armor, and
Yeah.
I'm sure they've all got a few spikes and stuff around as well, which is odd
They,
prosthetics to play with. But
they must have to do a lot. It's like I hear stories about, like, in some stories I've seen a horse ride through something like a thin
mm,
wall, a very thin wall, and horses naturally will not do that.
yeah,
In a film I watched recently, the wonderful award-winning 1990 Bronx Warriors, which I heartily recommend to people, they have people on horseback firing flamethrowers. Horses
crikey,
famously do not like flames, and so the fact that these horses are doing it without freaking out, and yeah, the amount of work that some of these horses are asked to do, and of course
mm,
this all builds up until the third film when every horse in New Zealand was used. So sorry, I'm actually I'm amazed. I'm watching this. I was getting a little bit emotional there watching Liv do her stuff.
yeah,
I didn't think I was going to get hit by the film. I know at the time, by the way, I was just a mess.
yeah. It's really well done.
Who did you see the film with, by the way? I've got to ask.
Um,
And when did you see the film? Like opening night or
I think I went on my own, and it would have been either the day it opened or the weekend it opened,
okay.
one or the other. I can't remember specifically, to be fair.
Hmm.
I certainly went and saw the other two opening day on my Todd, but that's kind of my preferred way of seeing films because I'm weird like that.
I was living in a small town in Hampshire.
Mm.
Hampshire being the inspiration for the Shire, so that's fitting. Living in a very small town called Sway, which, if you ever look it up, has a very, very cool tower. It's probably the only tower that you could say looks like a genuine wizard's tower. So I was living with two other guys in a place, single wall built, single fireplace in the house, single insulation or single pane windows. So I would go out and chop wood every day to keep the place going, and we were doing a club graphics business from there, designing
Lordy.
animations on very old computers that would normally take about an hour and a half to render each frame. So we were doing that, and our friend said, "Oh, do you want to come see Lord of the Rings?" And she picked me up, and I remember it just. I actually dressed up. I put on aftershave,
Okay.
and I because this was a big thing to me. But I remember like getting in the car and then taking the mick out of the fact that I had aftershave on, because up until that point I'd been this kind of forest-based recluse. But I really wanted to see this film, and I hadn't seen a film in the cinema for probably about a year before this point as well. And I
Oh, that's
just
fair.
remember it being staggering. But
Mm.
we watched it so late in the day, as in, sorry, in terms of the release date, that I had heard something in the press about them doing a little preview of the second film, and they bolted it onto the end. And I don't know if you ever remember this.
I did hear about that. I don't think it ever appeared on any. So I'm sure I saw it a couple of times, and it was never on any of the versions I saw
I
that
think
first time.
I think it might. I think it's on the first release DVD of Fellowship.
Yeah, they
I
did put a
think,
teaser
yeah.
on there. Yeah.
And it was beautiful because it was the first time that you saw Wormtongue.
First time we saw Wormtongue. First time we
Yeah,
saw Theoden,
yeah.
Éomer, Éowyn, just Rohan in general.
There were just little bits, but I remember the joy, and people like clearly had gone back to see this again,
Hmm.
and they were so happy that this was continuing. Of course, we in our ignorance thought, well, this will all die down. No one will be interested in the second film, and off they went.
Yeah, it was.
No, let's be honest. The peak of this entire genre didn't happen for another couple of years until I believe it was 2007. Let me just check. Yes, In the Name of the King, a Dungeon Siege
Oh
Tale.
God.
Which, if you ever want to know, dear listeners, what would happen if Jason Statham, John Rhys Davis, yes, Gimli,
Mm.
Ron Perlman, yes, Hellboy, and the mighty Ray Liotta were to do a Lord of the Rings style film? That's what it is. We
Doesn't
might
have
have to we
Burt.
might have to
Does,
watch this at some point.
yeah, doesn't have Burt Reynolds in as well. That film, or
Oh, good
or one of
grief!
one of the Dungeon Siege films, because they did more than one.
You're kidding.
Nope.
Okay, I will if you can seamlessly cover, and I will quickly.
I'm sure they've done more than one because it was UA Boll directed both of them, if I remember rightly.
Is he directing anything at the moment?
Uh,
I know he came out of the woodwork to. I think he took the mick out of Joker or something like that. He was like, or
did he?
there was
But that
some
that's bold.
there was some fantasy film that he took the mick out of
Hmm.
because he was like, look, you wanted me gone, and then you made this when I was gone. Are you sure you don't want me back? Oh no, that was it. That was it. He mocked Borderlands.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That
And he
tracks.
was like, now you wish I directed it. It's like, I actually kind of wish he directed that.
Yeah, it's like old monkey's paw. We got rid of him, and then we had that.
In the Name of the King, I think Burt Reynolds is in the Name of the King. He is King Conread.
Lordy.
Oh, I'm probably going to have to watch that
The thing
now.
is, you list off those names, and that's actually not a bad cast for any film, even a fancy one, because Ron Perlman's always game. Jason
Yep.
Statham can act genuinely when he wants to, but he can also do action like very few people are able to himself. Ray Liotta was Ray Liotta, capable of great
Ray
things.
Liotta, yeah, did some really, really good stuff. I mean, I'm now going to forget it, but there's a film that he did very, very low budget, which is one of my favorite films.
Narc.
Yes, that was it. Oh, and he put. I think he ended up putting some of his own money into Narc, and it is an absolute tour de force of a film. Lily Sobieski, who was very, very good, just left the business to become a parent.
Mm.
Claire Forlani, who did Meet Joe Black and Mallrats. Matthew
Yeah,
Lilliard, who obviously has had a bit of a career resurgence, but yeah, good cast. Just didn't
yeah,
work out.
yeah. I'm gonna add it to the list, aren't I?
Probably yes.
Dungeon Siege. Yeah.
Then again, I mean the old Ralph Bakshi animated film. I mean that had John Hurt as Aragorn.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
had a guy called Simon Chandler as Merry. Now I don't
I
know.
know
He's
that name.
he's one of those British character actors, but he's actually
Yeah.
turned up in House of the Dragon, which is a nice little thing.
Hmm.
Annette Crosby as Galadriel.
Yeah. That's
Now, if you don't know, I think That's One Foot in the Grave, isn't it?
Yes.
Is it? Is it? Oh, or is it another one?
No, that was her.
That was her.
She played Victor's wife.
So Victor Meldrew's wife was
Mm,
Galadriel. That blows my mind. But the best one was Anthony Daniels as Legolas.
blimey.
Can you imagine a prissy Legolas? Actually, I can, but there we go.
I mean, I'm trying to imagine Anthony Daniels as anything other than C-3PO, which is really hard.
Yeah, it's really hard because he keeps telling people that he played C-3PO.
There is that. But, you know, he found his role and he stuck it. It's done him very good stead.
Oh yeah, he's done very well out of that.
Mm.
It's interesting as well because a lot of, as you said, a lot of the actors weren't super well known.
Mm.
Though actually, I'd say Hugo was.
Hugo came to this almost directly off of The Matrix. Not completely, but he had only done it like maybe a year prior.
Wow.
Because I think The Matrix hadn't actually come out when he started filming this. But he was more known as a character actor in Australia. So I have seen a few of the films he's done prior to this, because there was one he did with Russell Crowe,
Yep.
where he plays a blind man and Crowe plays his best friend. And did they do Priscilla before this?
I was gonna say
Terence
Priscilla.
Stamp and
Oh, what's his name? Guy.
yes. I was trying to work out who the other one was, to be honest, because I keep getting mixed up with Tu Wong Fu in my head.
Oh
And
gosh, yes.
that's two sets of casts that are very. You don't want to mix them up because they're very different, but it's still easily done. Guy Pearce.
Oh, that's it. Yeah,
Was it Guy Pearce?
I think so. Don't worry. I'm on it.
Yeah.
Guy Pearce, a very very lovely guy. Right.
Yeah.
So Prometheus, Memento, Count of Monte Cristo. Come on, people. Why are you not showing me the one film that we all want to? Oh, there we go. Yep, Priscilla.
Wow.
Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. So yeah, he'd done that. So 7 years before this, Hugo Weaving was strolling around having the time of his life.
Yeah, but I mean, Hugo, Kate Blanchett was kind of just hitting her stride.
Yep.
Liv Tyler, of most of the actors, well, Sean Bean was probably the second biggest name after Liv, not counting
Yeah.
older actors like Ian McKellen was known as a character actor before this, but hadn't really X-Men hadn't come out, so he hadn't really reached that point of international acclaim. He'd had the
No,
good roles.
he'd had good roles. He'd been nominated for an Oscar, I believe,
Yes,
for
Apt
Gods and
Pupil.
Monsters. Oh, sorry.
Was it
Okay.
Apt Pupil or Gods and Monsters? It might have
It
been
might.
both, actually.
Yeah, because Apt Pupil had a bit of a controversy around it.
Mm.
Gods and Monsters was at the time as well. It was a very. Oh, I'll tell you what. If you watch Gods and Monsters now, sorry, this is a bit of a
Mm.
segue, folks. I mean, let's face it, we've done ourselves proud with segues this time
Yeah.
around. But if you ever watch Gods and Monsters, apart from the fact I bawled my eyes out at the cinema,
Mm.
I still don't to this day know why. But if you know about, so like his co-star in that was, and I've now forgotten his bloody
Brendan
name.
Fraser?
Thank you so much. I can't believe that. That was embarrassing. But I think everyone knows now, like some of the issues that Brendan suffered in Hollywood.
Mm.
That film, Gods and Monsters, covers so much of the same ground.
Yeah.
And you realize that I think Brendan's issues were before that film. I really hope it was. Otherwise, it's a case of life imitating art. But I think for him to go through with that kind of role as an A-list actor, as a straight A-list actor, I thought was just brilliant. But that's where I knew Ian from, and it's weird. The last fight. So real world now, folks. I work in finance. My last job was for a company called Allianz, and I work with someone who lives very, very near to Ian McCallum's pub, and he
Oh,
sees Ian quite a lot. Like they are on speaking terms,
fair
and
shout.
that blows my tiny mind.
That's very cool. I
So
dig that.
I keep threatening him. So look, please tell me when you're going down there next. I just want to say hello to the guy. I just want to sit opposite him and just listen to his voice just for a bit.
I mean, who wouldn't? He,
Ah,
he has one of those voices that you could listen to him read the phone book.
and I know this is a bit DVD copy, but he did try and take on like a little bit of Tolkien's accent.
Mm,
And if you ever listen to the DVD in that bit where he talks about how he takes on the accent, it is a masterclass in how anyone, and I mean anyone, can sound like Gandalf.
yeah.
It's great. And after that, even I could do a wicked Gandalf.
Mm,
And in fact, I think I remember for a couple of years at Auto Assembly and then TF Nation, John Paul Bove was very, very good at doing Gandalf and Ian McCallum. And so you would start to have conversations where everybody was just talking as Gandalf. And it got wonderfully surreal, especially when you're ordering pints.
oh, that's fantastic.
I would like a Guinness. I can't even do it now. It's just, oh my God, that sounded more like Sean Connery. But yeah, it's just it's very weird for a while. I am gonna say as well, Sean Bean, as you mentioned him.
Mm,
So Sean Bean was a very odd actor in the time in that he'd done a lot of stuff,
mm,
but he had this. This was, I think, just as the public knowledge of his film choices and his characters and the propensity of them to die. It was
mm.
just becoming to seep into the wider public.
Yeah, and it
Like
kind of
it had gone from being like a thing that certain film fans knew. It had gone to the point where film fans knew it. So it would be
mm,
in your Empire, so your
yeah,
Empire reader. So someone who's not like deep into art house, but people will go, oh yeah, well he's going to die. Him and Sean Pertwee for a
mm,
while. And then of course Sean after this then did Game of Thrones. We know that how that went. But then
yep,
I believe after that he actually started choosing roles in which he lives. I
yeah.
think I think
He's
I
had a
think
few
he
where
hit he hit a point where he just didn't want to be that guy anymore because it was limiting his roles.
yeah, I can see that because he did kind of because post Lord of the Rings he had stuff like Black Death where he dies a particularly spectacular manner, even though he
Oh,
was the the hero of the film, and just I mean Rings was not Rings. Game of Thrones was kind of a bit of a double switch because that book, the book itself, plays with expectations with Eddard Stark anyway,
yeah,
and it was at a point where he had the reputation for dying, but he'd actually already begun pushback. And Eddard is such a big character, such an important character that no one expects him to die
yeah.
until they go through with it. And it's such a well done moment at the end of that episode where because you see the sword go through his neck, which is a wonderful bit of editing the way they do that. But like you say, this comes at a very interesting place for him because this was post GoldenEye, post uh, Patriot games, and it had a number of kind of smaller roles as well where he normally died. But equally, he was coming off of Sharp, kind of his big role where
He was coming off. I think he was coming off Peak Sharp, and then
mm,
after this, didn't they sort of like Poirot almost? They were like, "Well, we've gone this far, let's finish it off," kind of thing.
well, I think they'd done Sharp's Waterloo before this, but they went back because Bernard Cornwell he'd done more Sharp books than they'd actually filmed,
Yeah,
and he'd actually released more books after the series was done. So there were several books that were set before the series during the Indian Rebellion, and there were several books set afterwards, after the Napoleonic War. So it's kind of an interesting place because they did adapt Sharp's Tiger, but they kind of set it much. They had to do some creative editing to make it take place later and
Okay.
take some liberties. Sharp gets very weird in that regard because they did run out of all the books effectively. They had to go back and do books that were set earlier. Again, because of how Cornwell wrote them, he didn't write the early adventures of Sharp. Sharp came into existence pretty much with his history with Wellesley and whatnot that we see in the show. But it's an interesting one. But like I say, he came from this place of being the big hero of this epic series where he hadn't died. That is what he was most known for in the UK. But internationally, he was more known as playing as a section of bad guys who met notably horrible endings.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a fascinating role because he gives it all. Because I mean, for me, Boromir I'd always seen him depicted more as a barbarian almost. But in this, he's very much the most cultured human character we meet, or from the most established human civilization. Because Aragorn is a ranger. He he's been raised more by elves than amongst men. He lives among men, but he's not really been raised by them. Whereas Boromir is the most pure example of a human from a real power, as opposed to the folks of Bree, who are much more. I, I don't like to use this term, but they feel smaller. Boromir
Yes.
feels more like a representative of a power in the world,
Yes.
and Bean does great work in establishing that Boromir he he has insight, and he is actually aware of his own weaknesses.
Yep. Very much.
I mean, I have a particular fondness for a scene much later on after he tries to take Ring of Frodo, when my interpretation is that he realizes exactly what he's done,
Yeah.
and
No, absolutely.
he's some people take it as him being still consumed by greed for the ring. I take it more as it's the moment he breaks the spell of the ring and realizes, what have I done?
Yep.
And it informs every, and we see the Boromir we really that we see in these early scenes is back as, and we see him as the great hero of Gondor that they really needed to survive as long as they did.
Yeah.
So
He is an incredibly, because he's not a bad guy,
no,
and he's set up to be proud. Yes,
mm,
but yeah, there's so much about him that you can admire, and I think like the end of the film for him, it's weird because he, again, sorry, DVD time now, but he talks about like I think they shot part of the coverage before lunch and the rest of it afterwards on that day,
mm,
and of course him and Vigo, like as you would expect, like everyone got on very well with Vigo. But he was just so matter of fact about it. Yeah, we did this, then we went for lunch, we ate some potatoes, rah rah rah, and then we did the rest of the scene, and it's like there are people that lose their minds over that scene. And it's
yeah,
so powerful, and it's because you've generated that much sympathy for the man, and it's all in his performance. So,
absolutely. And I'll just say now, we're coming to the end of our first half of the film. We're going to call it an end of the Council of Elrond.
can I just say,
I'm
we
s-
have
ab-
barely spoken it. We have barely spoken about the film. I think this is our
yeah,
proudest achievement. And no, but we have spoken about so much
I
about this,
know.
and we've
There's
talked about
so
other things. So, and I've still got other stuff on my list, and I'll probably add to it
absolutely.
by tomorrow. So,
I mean, there's stuff I want to talk about in terms of the Lord of the Rings and Games Workshop and
yeah,
some of. I was able to cover a lot of stuff I wanted to about in relation to Rings of Power because I did feel that was really important to.
No, I
I've
think
wanted
it's
to. I've
good.
wanted. I've wanted to verbalize for that for a while
Well,
because.
you've mentioned it. You've mentioned it on like other shows that we've
Mm,
done, and I thought, well, it's a good opportunity to talk about it here
yeah.
because the thing is as well that Rings of Power is something that people have. There are people that hate watch it, and then there are people as well that dissect it. And actually, if you ever listen to any of those, especially the ones that are competent about breaking down that
Mm,
sort of stuff, they make a lot of good points because they're being objective. But you come away with the idea of how the hell could they make this? But
mm,
then I do wonder as well, even a film like this, if there had been the same level of scrutiny to things going on. I mean, even the general public at the time after the third film was like, hang on a second, you had eagles that could fly to Mordor. And of course,
yeah.
the fan would go, no, you can't. And then
Yeah.
and then the cynic would go, "Well, why didn't you tell me that?" And then the fan would go, "Well, if we told you that, we'd have to give you like Frodo, you shall be the Fellowship of the Ring. Here are the rules and regulations. No
Yeah.
eagles are allowed. I'm sorry." It's you're kind of stuck. You just have to believe in the world, and I think that's something that this film did and
Mm,
had the opportunity to have at the time. Adults could believe in this world and they were
yeah.
allowed to. Whereas now, if the film plays the wrong card in terms of its perception with different types of audiences, then it's going to be damned before it gets a chance to grow.
Yeah.
It's a shame. So,
Indeed. And you know what I really find impressive on that score?
go on.
The theatrical cut. We're watching the extended because I prefer the extended. It's to me the complete experience.
Yeah.
It it has lots of stuff put in that just tickles my nerd bone as a Tolkien fan, and it doesn't feel like a nearly 4 hour movie. Whereas the theatrical cut, which is still nearly 3 hours long in its own
Hmm.
right, there is actually nothing fundamentally wrong with that cut.
No.
It is a perfectly excellent piece of filmmaking, and there's a reason it latched onto people because that's the thing. That's the thing, the film that people adored, and then the extended cut, uh, people had this desire for it that very few other films really have had. Because I mean, director's cuts and extended editions are not a new concept. They've been around since the late 80s, early 90s with Blade Runner and The Abyss as most obvious examples, and Aliens.
And let's face it, DVDs as well. DVDs and director's editions was pretty much the apex because it
Mm,
was really cheap. You could throw the director a couple of quid. They do a commentary as well. You get a whole new edition. You were double
yeah,
dipping. Che- Cheap content. Boom.
that
Whereas
happens.
now, I mean, now it's weird. A director's cut is almost like well, I think let's face it, Zack Snyder's made the whole idea of a
Mm.
director's cut being like some sort of challenge. Does anyone do director's cuts? Sorry, I just
Um,
realized. Like
you,
not the Snyder I need to get this published. Not any of those types of
it,
situations. But
you
do they
know
even
what?
exist now?
You do quite often find a home release that's classified as extended or
Oh, okay.
uncut, so has material put back in, which often is kind of there because they couldn't put it into a theatrical version for whatever reason. But they're not really as they don't feel as special as editions like this or Blade Runner or Aliens for that matter, because I mean you're right. DVD was the great leveler in terms of being able to access this content. It was a real film fans medium.
Yeah.
Blu-ray is wonderful, but I actually soon once I got used to Blu-ray, I do appreciate the fact that it is. I like how the menus are smoother and there's extra level to it. But DVD is still kind of like the apex because, like you say, it was a cheap format to make, and
Yeah.
the extras could be done. I mean, there was that brief period of of like a decade between 2000 and 2010 where Blu-ray really did kind of have dominance. And about 2008, it started to tail off because you start to find all these features being shifted across to the Blu-ray editions.
Yeah.
So if you wanted the best, and I get it, it's pushing the customer to that new format. But the DVD was still a perfectly valid format. I mean, I still have a massive DVD collection. But there's still films that, if there's a DVD option available, I might still pick it up just because I have the rest of the series on DVD and I don't want to buy the Blu-ray version. Because some Blu-rays are too high fidelity.
Yeah.
And I and DVD was the perfect intersection of those elements because you still got a damn good picture, a staggering amount of extras potentially, whilst also not being a medium that would break the bank to purchase.
Mm.
And the Rings movies were kind of the flag bearer for it because those extended editions, I mean, 4 discs for each film, 4 commentaries. Is it-
I saw. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. There was the odd cut and paste ones
Mm.
where like they had
The,
people
the,
in
act, the,
very
actor
different.
comment, the actor commentaries were normally they'd normally get the actors talking about their scenes, so
Yes, and then
they'd
sort of
switch.
roughly stitch them together. They felt a bit
Yeah,
impersonal.
a little bit, yeah. But then you had like the
The
ones
Hobbits.
where you'd have the Hobbit show up to do stuff. Christopher Lee and John Rhys Davis giving some of their anecdotes, which was always a laugh. Uh, you had Peter Jackson, Fran Walsh, and Philippa Boyens commentating together. You had the Weta team doing their commentaries. You had the production. I think the producers had a separate commentary they did with Jackson as well,
Yes.
and they just give you so much texture for the film, and that's before you even get to the appendices on the other 2 discs, which are just an astonishing amount of material on the making of the films.
Oh God, yeah.
And like I said, it's not like the standard releases were light on features either.
No, they
They
had a lot of
they
stuff.
had a lot of stuff going on, so it to me it's kind of like the high watermark for what film on a home release could be. As someone who had never experienced Laserdisc, just heard the stories, mainly because it was also much more. It's just more accessible, more durable,
No, absolutely.
and I adore it. I really do. I,
This is I'm sorry. There's not. I don't think we've wasted a minute on this recording. It's nuts.
excellent.
So, so that means that by the law of averages, I have to say 2.5 words during the entirety of the next recording.
Or we'll just have a lot of dead spaces where you just watch the more action-oriented part of the film kick into gear.
Hello, I'm Ad. That'd be me.
More than likely. But I've
So,
enjoyed this. I can't wait to do the second half tomorrow, to be
so,
fair.
so for those, because it's only people listening on YouTube, because no one else has dared to jump on board the bluff tonight. But yeah, I hope you like this. I hope you enjoyed
Yeah.
this. This is kind of what we do. We talk about stuff because the thing is, it's so easy to just go, "Hey, did you know Viggo Mortensen broke his foot when he kicked that helmet?" Yeah, we know that,
Mm.
but it's just nice to have the sort of discussions that you have about film with friends, and just yeah, just get it recorded. And there's so many
Yeah,
weird ways that the conversation can go. So
absolutely.
yeah, it's been great. So look forward to the next one.
Indeed. On which note, folks, we'll call it a night. So join us next time as we jump into the second half of the Fellowship of the Ring and the trek towards Mordor begins.
Lovely.
On which note, have a good one, folks. Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye bye.